I'd like to call this meeting to order, a meeting of the Plan Commission on Monday, May 10th at 6:30 p.m. in the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom. This and also could be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with Wisconsin Statute Sections 19.83 and 19.84 in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for discussion and action. Roll call shows all commissioners present. Next item on the agenda would be public input or public appearance. If there is anyone in the audience that'd like to come forward for public input or public appearance at this time to speak to this committee about anything other than an item that's listed for public hearing, there is one item for public hearing listed on tonight's agenda. But if there is anyone else in the audience or joining us via WebEx that would like to speak to us for public input or public appearance, you're welcome to do so at this time. I would ask that you state your name and your address for the record. Is there anyone wishing to come forward? No WebEx. Okay, then we'll go on to the next item, which would be the approval of minutes from the April 12th, 2021 Plan Commission meeting.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not opposed. That then takes us to our new business items for tonight. The first item on tonight's agenda is item A, Jason R. Belke, property owner of North 120 West 13537 Freistadt Road. Proposed text amendment for zoning code section 17.15 subsection 2 and for 17.14 subsection 4 for the Village of Germantown Municipal Code pertaining to conditional uses allowed in the RS2 single family zoning district. And it's listed on tonight's agenda for public hearing and for action. To give us some more information and background on our first order of new business, I'll turn the meeting over to our Community Development Director, Jeff Retzlaff. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, we have a zoning code text amendment proposed by Jason Bilke. This amendment has two parts. No, it's not working. All right. The first component of the amendment, number one, to amend section 17.15 sub 2 conditional uses in the RS2 single family residential zoning district, where section 17.152 is revised to add the following uses to the list of conditional uses that may be permitted in the RS2 district. Sub item K, construction services and contractor shops, and sub L, garden supplies and horticultural services. The second component, amendment number 2, is to section 17.15 sub 4. A new section is created to read as follows. The conditional uses permitted under section 17.15 2K, construction services, contractor shops, and L, garden supplies and horticultural services, shall be permitted only where the property meets the following conditions. The property is comprised of 4.0 acres or more, and the property is surrounded on all sides by property zoned A1 agricultural or A2 agricultural. Given the basis for the proposed amendment, I'm going to show you a couple of slides showing the Bilke property location on Freistadt Road for context. So as we discuss this, hopefully this will help. Closer view of the property from the southeast, looking down to the northwest of the property. It's 4 acres in size. It's located on Freistadt Road, on the south side of Freistadt Road, about a quarter mile east of Country Air Drive. The amendment initiated by Jason Bilke, a property owner of a 4-acre property located on Freistadt Road, is in an RS2 district. As indicated in the application, Mr. Bilke argues that the amendment is necessary because the RS2 zoning doesn't allow the best use of his 4-acre parcel, that being a business use, and that the RS2 zoning provides no benefit to other properties or the village overall that would result if an amendment allowing his business to remain on the property would occur. Mr. Bilkey argues that the property is best suited for construction and contracting operations, in part because the business is similar to horticultural services, which is allowed in the A1 and A2 districts, and that the Bilkey property is surrounded by large A1 and A2 zone parcels. Mr. Bilkey was issued a code violation in the summer of 2020 for operating a landscaping, construction, and snow plowing business in violation of the RS2 single-family district regulations. In the course of discussing a resolution to the code violation, some alternatives were identified as being available to Mr. Bilkey. In addition to ceasing operation, they included acquiring additional land, 6+ acres of land from an adjacent property owner, to combine with the 4 acres to create a minimum 10-acre parcel, rezone that 10 acres from RS2 to A2 agricultural, and apply for and obtain a conditional use permit for horticultural services, which is a use allowed in the A2 district with a conditional use permit. Another alternative was to apply for a CUP as a major home occupation, which, as I'll discuss briefly and in a few minutes, how the code allows that sort of thing as a home occupation. And finally, an alternative to petition the village to amend the RS2 district regulations in some manner to allow the existing business operation to proceed. And that's where we are this evening. Mr. Bilkey indicates that an attempt to acquire additional land from MMSD, an adjoining property owner to the east and south, was unsuccessful. Mr. Bilkey's conditional use permit application, which he did file for a major home occupation, was rejected by staff due to not meeting the definition and requirements for a major home occupation. Mr. Bilkey doesn't live on the property, and the number of employees exceeds the allowance under home occupation regulations for the RS2 district. So the zoning code text amendment was submitted. Mr. Bilkey has also filed an appeal with the Board of Zoning Appeals, an administrative appeal of zoning administrators' decisions and actions concerning this matter that is pending, presumably the outcome of this application. Now, going forward, I want to address some staff comments, and then Mr. Bilkey is here this evening, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss his proposal. In staff's opinion and generally accepted practice and profession, at least in my opinion, the purpose of a zoning code is to implement the public interest determined by the village board through land use and development policies that are adopted in the comprehensive plan. Zoning code amendments, whether they be a map rezoning or a text amendment, really should be made for the purpose of improving or enhancing the overall public interest and shouldn't be for the exclusive interest of one individual property owner. Zoning code text amendments should be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use plan map. They should not result in unlawful exclusionary zoning. They should correct errors in current code or clarify text with internal conflicts or ambiguous interpretations. They should update the code to address any changes in Wisconsin statutes or other village ordinances. They should also resolve any potential legal issues given recent case law or court decisions and opinions. Mr. Bilkey's text amendment, in my opinion, is for the exclusive benefit of his own personal and business interests and to provide relief from the pending code violations that I mentioned earlier, and not necessarily for any public interest or purpose as I've identified previously. Emily, it's not advancing. Okay. As I mentioned, the village zoning code is intended to implement the village's comprehensive plan, policies, goals, objectives, etc. In this case, our zoning code, like many other community zoning codes, utilizes a zoning district concept where the village is divided into specific zoning districts, each with a unique list of uses and regulations. Generally speaking, in our general zoning code, we have 2 agricultural districts, 13 residential districts, whether they be single family, 2-family, multifamily, or elderly housing. We have 5 business districts addressing commercial and office type uses. We have 1 institutional district, and we have 4 industrial districts. Each of those provides a separation of different and potentially incompatible land uses. However, there is some overlap. There's uses that are allowed in multiple districts, but generally they're grouped by residential or business or industrial. The zoning code allows the proposed amendment uses in the zoning district that are not residential districts. In other words, our zoning code already provides for the construction services, the contractor shops, the garden supplies, and the horticultural services in other zoning districts beyond the RS2 district. And there's a graphic that was included in the staff report. It's probably a little difficult to read, but I'll read through this. Construction services, they're allowed in 2 of our business districts, the B3 and the B5 business district with conditional use permits. Construction services is also allowed in the M1 limited industrial district. Contractor shops similarly are allowed in 2 of our business districts, the B3 and the B5, as well as the M1 industrial district. Garden supplies are allowed in the 2 agricultural districts, A1 and A2, with conditional use permits, and also in 3 of the business districts, the B1, the B2, and the B3, again, all with a conditional use permit, and allowed in the M1 limited industrial district. Horticultural services, like garden supplies, are allowed in the 2 agricultural districts, the 3 business districts with a conditional use permit, and the M1 industrial district. But as I mentioned earlier, we do have a rather liberal allowance for home occupations. Back in, I believe it was 2008, we changed our zoning code to allow for home occupations and professional home offices in a manner that was more extensive than what the previous code had allowed. In our case, as a home occupation, you can propose almost any type of business use within certain restrictions that are specified in the zoning code. And a horticultural services or a contractor shop, those are uses that have that do and have obtained permits to operate in certain residential districts, subject to those limitations that are spelled out in the home occupation regulations, including things like, 1, you've got to live on the property. The use has to be an accessory use to the use as a residence. It can't be the only use. It can't be the principal use of the property. And there are other things that limit the number of employees, limit how much activity coming in and out in terms of trucks and deliveries and that sort of thing. It all plays in. But essentially, the point is that our zoning code already provides for these 4 uses: the construction services, contractor shops, garden supplies, and horticultural services in a variety of zoning districts, and as well as by way of a home occupation in residential districts. So the idea that we need to amend the RS2 district to specifically provide for this seems to be out of place and excessive, in my opinion. I would point out that our zoning district system, if you will, is not a perfect system at all. Separate but abutting districts can create or result in conflicts depending upon what the uses are and what those districts are. There's classic example, horticultural services, for example. appears to be a constantly changing land use with a variety of services and characteristics. We've experienced this ourselves over the last 10 years or more, where horticultural services, landscaping businesses, and the like have located in property that's properly zoned. They've obtained the necessary permits and approvals. And even with that, the districting system doesn't seem to work, where you've got, for example, an agricultural district butting up against a residential district. The TLC Acres Nursery and Landscaping contractors on Appleton Avenue is a good example, probably the most recent example. Wendland Landscaping Services on Division Road is another one that has had some conflicts with the abutting residential to the south over the years. And even the DJ Frank landscaping operation on Freistadt Road, as isolated, relatively isolated as it is from residential areas, has we've had some issues because of the type of operations that have over time have changed and are different than what were originally approved as part of the conditional use permit issued to those businesses in those particular zoning districts. So again, it's not a perfect system, but it is the system that we employ and that we're charged with administering and enforcing. As I mentioned, the purpose of our zoning code is to implement the land use and development policies spelled out in our comprehensive plan using this district concept. Our 2020 land use plan classifies this particular area within which the Bilke property is located and the surrounding properties as rural residential. It's the yellow shaded category on the graphic. Rural residential is intended as a transitional area for residential uses on lots 1 acre or more in area served by on-site sanitary and private wells. This area in certain parts of the village, the rural residential areas, are developing somewhat rapidly. In this particular instance, in the immediate neighborhood of the Bilke property, we have the Harvest Hills subdivision, the Woodland Ponds subdivisions, and Renwood to the west. And I've shaded those on the graphic, as you can see the relative location or proximity of the Bilke property highlighted in red. Now, our 2050 plan, which we're currently discussing and have not yet adopted, employs our neighborhood district and corridor concept. That plan designates the area south of Freistadt Road as a future residential neighborhood intended for higher density single-family lots, generally 20,000 square feet or larger, given the extension of our sewer service area along Country Air Drive. And as you can see in the graphic, the intended sewer service area that is a result of the recent facility expansion into the Renwood subdivision now includes that entire area that's shown as the Renwood neighborhood. There's a dashed line along Freistadt Road on the north and along on the east side of that neighborhood, and goes down to Mequon Road to join in with the current sewer service area. Under the 2050 plan, that area is intended to develop at a higher density with smaller residential lots. The rural preservation area within which the Bilke property is located, as shown on this map, as well as the MMSD property, which is the only other property in that green area south of Freistadt Road, is included in that rural preservation area simply because the MMSD conservation goal of their property ownership. As indicated in the application materials, again, Mr. Bilke argues that his property is best suited for a construction and contracting business operation because it is surrounded by rural property, large parcels zoned A1 and A2. This is not the vision of the village under the current 2020 plan, nor the future 2050 plan as it's currently drafted. The conditions of being surrounded by large undeveloped A1 and A2 zone tracts may be the current situation, but it's going to be short-lived if the development trends and plans for the village continue to move forward as they have. So I'll just wrap up the staff recommendation is, as indicated in the staff report, to deny the proposed text amendment to amend the sections of 17.15 and 17.15 sub 4 of the zoning code to add those 4 uses as conditional uses in the RS2 residential district. That concludes my presentation. Mr. Bilkey is here this evening, and I think he's represented by his attorney. And if you folks have comments or certainly come on forward and make those now.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity tonight to talk some more about the amendment. So I believe staff has provided a good overview of the exact change that's being requested. And generally what has prompted this request is that Mr. Belke, who's been in this property for approximately 13 years and has operated a business out of the property for 13 years, and I'll let him speak on that a little bit more in a moment. But his options, as proposed by staff at the village, is to either move out his entirety of his business to somewhere else. And in that discussion of options here, one of the suggestions is to propose an amendment that would allow a change to allow this business to continue in the village. In discussing with staff and the village attorney, there was a specific discussion about attempting to limit the scope of any amendment to apply more specifically to this specific instance, and suggestion that in the past, the village has looked at specific amendments to address those problems. In this circumstance, whether it applies to this specific property or generally to the village, I guess would be a further comment for this planning commission or the village board to provide further comment to or adjustments of the amendment. But in particular, what is being proposed here is a limited amendment to provide for orderly use of this property as a business and to avoid external conflicts, external problems for other properties, and to avoid problems that this may open the door to other properties that aren't similarly situated from becoming problematic. And in particular, if you look at the property, it is a property that had a barn, outbuildings, and was generally set up and used previously prior to Mr. Belke's ownership as a contracting business. The nature of the property, it is in fact surrounded by large tracts at 35 acres plus of agricultural land on all sides. What that means is the zoning the zoning in the surrounding area would allow for the specific use that Mr. Belke is attempting to use the property for, horticultural services in particular. And those surrounding areas would allow that use, where Mr. Belke is essentially an island in the middle of those uses. And because of that, the impacts to the community would be minimal in that the same types of uses would be allowed on those other properties. And the types of uses on the neighboring agricultural properties would be expected on other agricultural properties. So the uses by Mr. Belke directly impacting his neighbor would be similar to the same uses that his neighbors may impact him with. In this situation, their closest residential neighbors are quite far away, and on Frystad Road, a fairly large and well-traveled roadway. So essentially, put another way, the conditional uses that would be allowed under this amendment are virtually identical to those applying to the neighboring properties. And as a conditional use, the village board would have ultimate authority to condition the use and insert restrictions and limitations that would prevent any impacts or harm to the neighboring community. It was raised that there were in the past issues with commercial properties or commercially used properties, such as other landscaping businesses, causing problems because they're abutting to residential areas. Mr. Belkey's property is actually the opposite of that problem in that he is a residential property abutting agricultural properties that could be used for other commercial purposes as well. So I don't believe that that situation exists here, and that again, the opposite is true, and the problems that that would cause are negated here. The developed subdivisions that are noted are not within any general range of the property that would result in impacts or harm to those areas, and the access points are quite a bit different. So unless the board has any further questions for me, I'd let Mr. Belkey speak a little more about his particular use of his property.
Any questions for the attorney?
Not at this time.
Okay. Mr. Belkey?
So I purchased the property in 2008. I actually contacted the planning commission and asked them if it would be okay if I could run a business out of the property. Sent an email. I talked to him in the office, and I talked to him even again after I sent the email, saying that it was okay to run a business out of this property. I was never trying to hide anything. I grew up in Germantown, moved here in 5th grade. I lived on Wasaki and Lovers Lane, graduated in 99, was a part of Germantown's first football state championship. Moved back right after college to the area. I love Germantown. I've helped coach different sports at the high school. I've do work for Germantown. Every year I'm doing work for, we're helping with roadway stuff if things need to get done, asphalt or concrete work. I work for the high school, and I don't agree that it's just helping Jason Belkey. We employ local residents. We try to work with Joel Farron and Stakoviak to try to get Germantown students opportunities at employment. And our shop is not, it's not like a David J. Frank. It's definitely not like a TLC Acres. It's not even close. Those are places, or even Wendland, those are places you can drive by and you can pick up landscape material. You can find their address online. Our address online is the Thiensville Post Office. We don't want people coming there. People do not come to our shop. We come there, we get our vehicles, and we leave, and we go to our job site. For causing a disturbance and being loud, I've never been directly, by any neighbors, they've never directly said you're being too loud. We've recently had, a noise complaint from the police, and that's it. Otherwise, we we try to mind our own business. I mean, like I said, we've been here for 13 years. You can see it on Google Earth. Footprint really hasn't changed a whole lot. But the way that we came up with this amended change, I think there's only one other property in Germantown that this would actually pertain to as well. But I think that's about all I have to say. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Belke? Not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming up. Then at this time, I would open the public hearing by hereby stating a notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held before the Village of Germantown Plan Commission at the Germantown Village Hall located on Mequon Road in Germantown on Monday, April 12th, which was previously, and we extended it until today at 6:30 p.m. or later. The purpose of said hearing will be to hear any and all parties, attorneys, or agents for or against a request filed by Jason R. Belke for the proposed text amendment to the following sections of the zoning code of Chapter 17 of the Village of Germantown Municipal Code, be Chapter 17-.15 subsection 2, 17.15 subsection 4, pertaining to conditional uses allowing in the RS2 single-family zoning district. See. So the application has been filed by Jason Belke, and we are extending the public hearing till tonight as well. So if there's anyone in our audience or is joining us online that would like to speak for or against the the change to the municipal code, you're welcome to do so at this time. All I would ask is that you state your name and your address for the record. Is there anyone wishing to come forward to speak for or against? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Bruce Bernardi. Live at North 120, West 13645 Freistadt Road, Germantown. I live directly next door to the property. I'm a lifelong resident of Germantown. My wife and I purchased the 40-acre property and built our house and moved in April of '94. On, I believe, the last Planning Commission meeting when this was tabled, when Mr. Belke couldn't make it, my concerns, my comments, and other people sent in their comments by email, and letters from other area residents were presented at the Planning Commission meeting, all expressing great concerns over any changes in the zoning of the Belke property. As we are all concerned as to how the business has grown and is running well over its capacity at this site, the large amount of employees, the noise, the debris that has been hauled in, the amount of traffic in and out of the property, storage of materials, the running of equipment, the loading of trucks in the mornings and during the day, sometimes weekends, the deliveries, the loading of salt in the wintertime. Between the trucks, the trailers, the equipment, the skid loaders, Mr. Belke has approximately 30 to 35 pieces of equipment on this property and parked outside. That picture right there does not do justice. All that green spot right there that looks like grass right now is a parking lot, and that's all full of equipment. Currently, Mr. Belke is running his business illegally from this property with no permits. His property is zoned RS2, as Mr. Retzloff stated, which is allows for a small business, 1 or 2 employees, and the property owner must reside at the property. Mr. Belke does not live at 135-7 Freistadt Road address. We are also concerned on how this business is affecting the area, both above and below the ground level, runoff, and the general rural character of the area. Mr. Belke has already compromised certain areas of his business by his business practices. Most As my comments and concerns were expressed at the April 12th meeting, therefore I will not go over them again. But if there is any changes made regarding the zoning codes for the Belkey property, this will only benefit Mr. Belkey and his business, not the village or the better good of the residents of Germantown. In response to Mr. Belkey's attorney, he said something about, or Jason said something about the previous owner running a business out of here. He was a carpenter and was the owner and maybe one employee, and that was it. So therefore, I request the planning commission to deny his request. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time to speak for or against the proposed text amendments to the sections of the zoning code for Germantown? Sir.
Right, mask down. Thank you. My name is David Gierach. I live at North 124 West 18518 Lovers Lane in Germantown. I am not a close by neighbor to the property in question, but I am a lifelong resident of Germantown with a short, brief 2-year stint in the military. My main concern on this, or my main comment on this, was I commend Mr. Bilkey for building a successful business. When he started out, it appears that business on that property, he was small enough to meet all the requirements of that property. His business has grown. As we all know, when businesses grow, you outgrow the facilities sometimes. We've all been in the situation where our families grew. We had to get bigger houses. We had to get bigger cars. It appears to me that this may be the case where there are no other solutions, it appears, on that property to expand at that location. And unfortunately, he may have to look to move to a bigger facility in a situation or in an area that is permissible to operate his business at the present size that it is. So that was my main concern. So I would like to recommend the denial of the changes. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward to speak for or against the proposed text amendments to the sections of the zoning code for Germantown? Anyone within our audience or online via WebEx that wishes to come forward? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Tracy Bernardi. I live at West 13645 Freistadt Road, immediately west of the property that Mr. Belkey owns. I know the Planning Commission probably gets a lot of paperwork on this, but I do want to point out that it was Mr. Belkey that requested and initiated this amendment change, and he had notice of it long before the public saw maybe a legal notice on the website or at the library, but yet he was unable to prepare or attend the original scheduled Planning Commission meeting on April 12th. I'd like to remind you also of the people who spoke against this amendment change at that meeting. Steve and Jody Ruppnow, these are from the Planning Commission minutes. I'm just reading from that. Their comments were against the request to rezone the property because of construction, traffic, and noise. Janice Bernardi, Freistadt Road, comments were against the proposal because of traffic and noise. Bruce Bernardi, my husband, he spoke against it, saying that Mr. Belkey is running a business without permits and is storing several vehicles on the property, voiced concerns of noise and debris. I spoke against it, saying that Mr. Belkey does not live on the property. It's a very busy landscape business, loud, dusty, and the business has outgrown the location. Sally Wenslow, who is here tonight, she spoke against it, saying she sees the vehicles and equipment from her house and because of the noise. There were two other residents. Both of them lived across from TLC, and they made comments of vehicles coming in and out, trucks dumping, hydraulic noise, distracting, dust, and that it's devaluing their house and it's a nuisance. And they said they were giving their opinions as to a perspective of what we may be experiencing now or in the future if this would get approved, this change would get approved. And the last person speaking was Art Zabel. He did not recommend the zoning code. He said he recommended to uphold the staff recommendations. He said the property is zoned residential and don't need tailgate banging or backup alarms and vehicle noise. With that, I want to point out that Mr. Belke's business originally started out small, as that gentleman said. It was himself and a cousin, two people working, and the work was done away from the site. They cut lawn and they plowed snow. Just like anything else, he didn't start out at $1 million business. He started out small and he gradually grew. So, and it was also kept much less disruptive to us and other neighbors when he was living on the property. Now he doesn't even live there anymore, and he's rarely there at all to supervise these employees during the work hours. When he does happen to sporadically show up, he's not on site for more than 20 to 30 minutes. Some of these employees, I've seen police reports on some of the people there, they're high turnover jobs. He had called in once, one of his employees was drug use and passed out in the parking lot. He's had numerous thefts by his employees of his property there. So we're subjected to that also, living next door. Mr. Belke has not only been illegally operating this business in the RS2 zoning without a permit since August of 2020, but he's also in trouble for his illegal dumping, trespassing, and felling of trees on the MMSD's conservancy land, which surrounds him. And he's been instructed to clean it up and revegetate it, which to date, he's only partially cleaned it up and he has not revegetated it. Much of the information Mr. Belke said tonight and supplied in his explanation for the proposed change is either just false or highly exaggerated. When he refers to the historical uses of the property, I don't feel that's relevant for numerous reasons. There hasn't been an active farm operation on that property since approximately 1980. When there was a farm operation, it contained 80 acres. And that's what those businesses were used for. Once it got smaller, he's an RS2 zone now with 4 acres. Comparing himself to surrounding A1 land, to me, is kind of like a 19-year-old hanging out with 21-year-olds and say, well, I'm surrounded by all these 21-year-olds, I should be able to drink too. He's RS2, he has different requirements than what agricultural does. And he seems to discount the fact that our agricultural is zoned that because of its size, and we live there. That is the main purpose, and the most anything is going on. You have a farmer coming in twice a year who plants for less than 4 hours one day and harvests for probably the same amount of time, maybe 6 hours in fall. So that is no way in comparison to what is going on at his property. I guess before he purchased the property, there were already concerns about the large square footage buildings that were left on the property once it was rezoned to RS2. It appears the village's planning department advised the owners that future additions to these buildings would not be allowed. And Mr. Belke just went ahead and added significant amount of hideous concrete block bins, as well as hoop-covered salt bins that we look out year-round from our living room And he's done this as he pleases without any review by any officials in the village or any approval. He's also added an insanely large parking lot, which that photo there is probably from 2012, when he farmed, he planted a garden where that grass is and sold stuff in front of his house. And it is nowhere like that. And actually the brown part to the east of that red line, that is restricted from any type of development because of the wetlands there. And you can tell he's plowed it up and had things planted there. So he doesn't follow rules. As far as where that parking lot is put in, he has maintained or brought in all his commercial business waste and left it on his property for years. And then he spread that out over the property and installed this parking lot without any engineer reviewing it or approving it. And it's about at least 4 feet higher than the original grade. He does park the majority of his vehicles all outside. They are not in, well, if they're inside, there's still at least 30, 35 of them outside. And we see that from our property when we're in our backyard, our side yard, from inside our house. And I don't feel we should have to be looking at a trucking parking lot or listening to the noise generated from a business that operates a significant amount of the time throughout each day. And there is there's an awful lot of work being done at this facility in addition to being off site. These actions are being committed by Mr. Belke, and he's aware he shouldn't be doing them because he doesn't have the necessary permits. However, he continues to do what is good for him without concern of neighbors around his property. He was formally advised of these facts in August of 2020, and he didn't do the ethical thing of stopping his operation, nor did he promptly try to rectify the situation. I believe he didn't even apply for a CUP until around January of 2021. I believe character and credibility of an individual should be taken into consideration. If he is willing to operate so immorally now, I can only imagine his actions and activities would become horrendous if the text code is amended to make it okay for him to operate this construction type business. The village already has complaints from residents who live around similar businesses when they are operating within the correct zoning. So allowing this to be done in an RS2 zoning makes no logical sense in my opinion. As far as things Mr. Belke said and or his attorney, well, my husband addressed the thing about the contracting business. I do have a picture of the house that contractor was operating out of before he moved to that facility. And the only reason they moved there was to take care of his father-in-law when he became too ill to take care of himself. It is a very small home in Port Washington. He only did paperwork. It is not a contracting business. And as far as the attorney saying that he's an island, amongst agricultural, Mr. Belke knew he was an island when he bought the property. Everything, our property was there. Everything is the way it is now is the way when he bought it. And as far as saying the neighborhood districts are far away from Mr. Belke, they're a quarter of a mile. I mean, in my opinion, that's pretty close. I can see some of those houses going up in Harvest Hills. And the other property that he mentioned, that there was one other one, I think from reviewing the notes that came with the packet tonight, that property really doesn't pertain at all. One, because it does have RS2 zoning around it. There's some houses across the street. And also it appears he has requested to go to agricultural too from that zoning. So this is only going to benefit Mr. Belke, and he certainly can continue his business anywhere else in Wisconsin, in Germantown. And he can still help Germantown high school students if that's actually what he's doing, if he's operating out of an industrial zone area, a business zone area. So I just ask that you do not approve this, as it will affect people living in their homes around that area. And while Mr. Belke lives in a nice quiet subdivision in Colgate and doesn't supervise his employees here, we pay the consequence of that. That's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time to speak for or against the changes to the zoning code? Anyone else? One last time. Anyone else that wishes to come forward to speak for or against the recommended changes to the zoning code? Anybody online? Okay. All right, then we will close this public hearing. That then takes us to the action part. Commissioners,
Make a motion to approve the request for amendment to section 17.15 parent 2 and 17.15 parent 4 of the zoning code as presented.
motion made. Do we have a second? Second. Motion made and seconded. Trustee Baum.
Director Retzloff, have you been involved in litigation on this property? A court proceeding related to issues with the neighbors?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Lori was subpoenaed to testify up at the Washington County Circuit Court concerning a dispute between the neighbor Bernardi's and Mr. Bilkey's employee, who was, I believe, filing for a restraining order against the Bernardi's. I happened to be out of the office the day that the subpoena was brought to Village Hall. So Lori was the lucky one. But that happened on a Friday. The following Monday, we discussed with the village attorney and attorneys involved in the case, as well as the judge, to allow me to testify in lieu of Lori, given my involvement in the situation. So yes, I have been involved in a case related to this particular property and the operation.
Several years ago, were there complaints about
I don't recall us getting any specific complaints. At least I don't recall. I believe there have been vehicles parked in the front lawn. I don't know if they were for sale. I recall seeing some earlier this last year, I guess it would be. I'm already a year behind.
two other companies that talked about the issues that are going on with this property? Is it not on? Sorry. It is a common problem. Mr. Belke, you've got a successful business, but you've outgrown your property. I've been through it. Other business owners go through it. It's time to move on. The businesses you have is becoming more and more successful. I don't see it working in this area with the development that is proposed here, with the neighbors that are there. The complaints are coming in. When it was a small operation, it was legal. You had stated, you were told that you could have this business there. When you started, you probably could. Today, with the operation that you have, I don't think it's appropriate. Your attorney talked about avoiding conflicts with the adjacent uses. But yet, we just had the village director Retzloff tell us about a conflict that is immediate to the adjacent neighbor that resulted in a court hearing. That's not what neighbors do to each other. You want to change this ordinance so that others can also do what you're doing. I haven't seen an outpouring of desire to run businesses out of this section of the village. This section of the village, we got multiple developers coming in wanting to develop this area as residential, not as commercial. Your attorney also said the village has ultimate authority to allow similar uses. I don't see the village allowing this similar use on adjacent properties. I see the village allowing further residential development. That's what our 2050 plan has. One other comment was Belkey would be the norm for the area. Everyone else could do what you're doing. Again, that's contradictory to what that area is doing. I really think you've just outgrown this property. And you really have to consider what is best for your neighbors and what's best for you. The more stuff you put on this property, the more of an eyesore it's going to be to the area. I drive by it every week, 2-3 times a week. I see everything that's in the backyard. I have stopped by the house when the Belkeys have the police department there, illustrating what is going on your property and the noise and the nuisance that you're causing to their property. I really implore you to do the right thing and realize that you've outgrown this property.
Further discussion? No further discussion? Questions?
Yes, I'll make a comment and a question. One, I live in Woodland Pond subdivision, and I would agree. I mean, I drive by your property every day on Frystead, and I would say that I can see supplies and equipment and materials behind the house and on the lot, and they're not in an attached storage facility. They're out in the open. You can see them as you drive by. One question I do have is that in the code, it said that if this is denied, he'll have 3 months that he can continue to operate his business on the property. What is the ramifications of him not complying with that 3-month requirement? What happens if, according to the code, if denied, the conduct of the home occupation shall cease with 3 months from the date the application is denied, is what's in the code.
I'm not sure where you're reading from, Bob.
I'll get it for you. It's in the major and minor home occupation. It's at 1761. Is that correct?
That's the right code. Let me.
Okay.
Still have the floor, Mr. Williams.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was just my comments.
I can make a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Shadid.
Okay. I really kind of feel like that the laws and rules that we have applying to zoning right now, citizens depend on us to uphold those. I don't see any circumstances here that even remotely indicate that we should approve this. I just see it detrimental to the entire neighborhood. I've seen nothing come up as a positive. So I'm against it.
Senator Retzloff.
The section, Bob, that you're referring to is a section that was added to an attempt to deal with pre-existing home occupations at the time this code was adopted. This was drafted in late 2006 and was ultimately adopted in early 2007. And essentially, without reading it verbatim, it says that if you're a pre-existing home occupation, you've got 6 months from the date this code was adopted to come on in and apply for whatever permit you need. And that if you don't get that permit, you've got 3 months within which to sort of tidy up, wrap things up, and cease operations. So realistically, and I think legally, this provision no longer applies since we're now past 6 months after this particular part of the code was adopted. You know, we're 15 years down the road. So that doesn't have any impact.
Didn't you also say specifically that the person would be residing on the property when they made that request?
Well,
I don't know if
Mr.
it
Belkey
applies.
doesn't live on the property.
I don't think it apply in this situation if it deals with home businesses as they currently exist or as they've been recognized and then applied for that that home occupation or to run a business from their home. So I don't know if that applies here.
Yeah, I don't either, for sure.
It really matters, but I do want to respond to the comment that the planning department, I think Mr. Bilkey said the planning commission, I'm sure you meant the planning department, was contacted when he first obtained or purchased the property and asked if he could operate his business. We have no record of any email or phone record or any documentation supporting that claim. But it really, more importantly, at that point in time, I was the only staff person other than Lori that was here in the planning department at that point in time. And I wouldn't have said simply just go ahead and operate your business. We had just a year earlier adopted our new home occupation rules. So at a minimum, I would have at least discussed or suggested we need to look at this in light of the RS2 single family residential zoning district. And then more importantly, you know, our home occupation rules. If you were going to live on the property, then you know, let's discuss that. And I have no recollection of those contacts. So
Further
I
discussion,
could, I could comment a bit about what Jeff just said.
Mr. Shadid.
Some time back, I wanted to do some changes to my property, never did them. But I came to the planning department and asked for some clarification on some of the rules and policies. And Lori at that time made copies of the statutes, gave me copies, and I took them and I decided later, not because of her information, but that I wasn't going to make the change. The point was I contacted the plan department, but that doesn't mean I had permission. It just means I talked to somebody there. Sometimes that can get misconstrued. So I understand what you're saying, Jeff.
Further discussion, Mr. Leshevsky.
I just wanted to add that I guess I kind of agree with Bill that I don't drive by the property every day, so I guess maybe a little more dispassionate. But I'm looking for something to kind of dig in here and say this makes sense, and I can't find it. I mean, I hear the neighbors, they're very passionate about, you know, the size of the business and what it's grown to and everything. I'd say congratulations, your business is so big, it's busting out of its, you know, the seams. But that's the problem, it's busting out of the seams. And so for this particular area, it's incompatible at this point. So I just don't, there's no traction here for me.
Further discussion. The only additional comment that I would make to Mr. Belkey, and before I make any other comment, can we go out a little bit? Is there in the proximity of this RS2, where is other RS2 in this area? Is there none, or is it just really truly all agricultural?
there are some small residential lots, I believe, in this vicinity here. Relatively smaller lot residential.
Can we go then to what you were showing in the 2050 plan, please?
Good indicator of where that pre-existing small lot residential is the rural residential classification of the current 2020 map, which is the yellow shaded areas. When the plan in 2020 was, I'm sorry, thank you, was adopted, it was with this notion of the green areas would be the agricultural open space residential where you could have 5-acre parcels. Anything that was already developed residential and smaller than 5 acres was colored in the yellow. So some of those yellow pieces could be RS2 if they're 2 acres. Some of them could be 4 acres. But they generally are residentially zoned parcels, all of the yellow.
And they're south of Freistadt Road, so they don't fall into the 5-acre minimum.
Right. And they were created before the rule, the 5-acre rule was adopted.
Can I see the 2050 proposed, please? Okay. Okay.
Purpose for the green to the right and below the red spot is that's MMSD land.
Yeah, that's all owned by MMSD.
Environmental corridor.
Now, arguably, the Bilkey 4-acre piece could have been included in that Renwood neighborhood. It's certainly possible. Now, granted, the sewer service area boundary is, it's held tight to Freistadt Road and the quarter section line that drops north and south. But realistically, we know that those sewer service areas, depending upon the topography and whether a development has a pump or a lift station, can be served outside of the sewer service area if there's an expansion that's approved by MMSD and the DNR. So it's not inconceivable that the Bilkey property could be included in the Renwood neighborhood as a yellow parcel and therefore be eligible for further land division and development in that 20,000 acre lot sort of category, along with the rest of the yellow.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Belkey, as far as looking at this amendment, first I would commend you on the success of your business. As Mr. Leszewski said, you're a hard worker. It shows because your business is growing, and that's to congratulate you for that and for the services that you provide to your customers. You must do a good job, otherwise they wouldn't come back to you. So congratulations for that. But it has been my experience in this village over and over again, when we start mixing residential with commercial or residential with industrial, that's where we start to see issues come up, and where we continue to see issues and complaints, and one tends to rub against the other a little bit harder, and it's usually the residential that loses that particular argument. We could look at examples with our downtown area with Gales. You could look at examples of other landscape businesses that have done a home business, and the neighbors are having issues with noise or with the truck traffic or with any of the things that they're doing on their property. So as far as the amendment is concerned, or the recommendation to change our zoning, I will not vote for it for that reason, because it long-term always creates an issue for the residents, and it doesn't work well in a residential neighborhood. As we see going forward, we propose more of the same, of 2-acre or less south of Freistadt and 5 acres north, or in this area, more of an environmental protection corridor in that green area. So as we go ahead and go towards our 2050 plan, your change to the zoning could impact more lots than just the 2 that are there today. It could go to many more, as other neighborhoods or other landowners change over to a 1 or 2 acre residential, as we're recommending here in our 2050 plan. And again, I think that would long-term cause issues for the other residents that have been in that area or go to that area to live for that reason. So for that reason, and from the experience that I've seen since I've been on this board of the mix of residential to industrial or residential to commercial, when we put them together, there's an issue. I will vote against this particular amendment for that reason. Further discussion? Mr. Nilles.
Could I just get clarification on the motion? Just make it crystal clear what the motion is.
The motion that has been proposed is it reads on as section A is the proposed text amendment to the zoning code section 17.15 subsection 2 and 17.14 subsection 4 to the municipal code pertaining to conditional uses that are allowed on RS2. And
So,
this would allow the a business of Mr. Belkey's type to be in a RS2 zoning and operate with a conditional use.
but the motion that I heard was to approve as presented.
That's correct. Correct, because that's how it's on our, we can't make a motion in the negative.
I just want to make sure everybody's crystal clear on that.
Right,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
while you were reading that, it struck me that what you were citing as the code references, one of those was incorrect. You read it correctly off the agenda, but the actual section is 17.15 sub 2 and 17.15 sub 4.
Ah, I see. Okay, as it states in the public hearing.
Would you like me to correct that in the motion?
Yes,
Okay, let me get back to the first page of this. So I believe I read it the right way. My motion was to approve the request for approval of an amendment to section 17.15 parent 2 and 17.15 parent 4 of the zoning code to add construction services, contractor shops, garden supplies, horticultural as conditional uses in the RS2 single-family residential district as presented. Did I get all the numbers correct?
you did.
Okay,
That's how you read it the first
I
time? Is that
believe
where
I-
you took your motion from?
yeah,
Then you read it right.
okay.
Okay. All right, further discussion?
Does, just for clarity, does the second have to approve that?
No, because you read it the same way the first
I
time.
believe I did. I just want to make sure.
But he does anyway.
Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion fails. Sorry, Mr. Belkey. Thank you for coming, though. Thank you for spending time with us, and thank you for explaining your position with us.
Mr. Chairman, I'd point out that this is a recommendation from the Plan Commission
correct.
to the village board, and final action by the board wouldn't be scheduled until the first meeting in June.
That's correct, Mr. Belkey. That is the village board to take action on it. So I do invite you to come to the village board. You said the first meeting in June?
Yes.
And that is on for everybody's calendars on June 7th at 7 PM here. And that'll be before the full board. Thank you. Next item under new business is new business item B, Scott Morgan, property owner of All Terrain Construction Company at North 112 West 14972 Mequon Road, site plan review for a 4,400 square foot accessory building and site improvements. To give us more information on new business item B, I'll turn the meeting over again to our Community Development Director, Jeff Retzlaff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Morgan, agent for All Terrain Construction, and the property owner, All Terrain Adventure Company, is seeking approval of building plans for a 4,400 square foot detached accessory storage building and site development plans for parking lot reconstruction, stormwater facility improvements, retaining wall to the existing site on Mequon Road, which is shown on the screen. The property is to the east is the House of Homemade Sausage, commercial business, Zone B3. This property, the subject property is Zone B3, and to the west is the RM2 apartment complex. I forget the name of it. Another view, and here is a view from Mequon Road looking into the property. This is sort of the pre-existing condition when Mr. Morgan first purchased the property. Back in June of last year, conditional use permit number 6-20 was granted to Mr. Morgan for a construction services contractor shop located in a B3 business district, providing residential and commercial concrete services. At the time, there were 6 employees as part of the business. Building improvements that are proposed, again, a 4,400 square foot accessory storage building. It's a steel-sided building, steel siding and roofing and trim to 2 shades of gray. The site improvements include a reconstruction of the existing parking lot, that sort of sea of asphalt that you saw in the last aerial photo. That's going to be effectively removed and replaced with a smaller 5-stall parking lot with 1 single driveway complying with the current zoning requirements for access to Mequon Road. Also, an on-site stormwater basin is proposed, a rain garden, and with some both on-site storm sewer. Will deal with the additional runoff from the property. There is also a additional pavement and that runs along the east side of the existing dwelling to the back where the new structure will be located. And along with that driveway on the east side of the building is a retaining wall along the east property line. And I've kind of zipped through the site plan photos rather quickly, but this one shows the south half of the site. I couldn't squeeze it all on there without it being totally illegible. But as you can see to the left, the southwest corner of the parcel, north of Mequon Road on the bottom, is the storm basin, the 5-stall parking lot, the driveway, all of which will be paved, and the drive going to the back of the property where the proposed structure will be located. We've got some elevations included in the plans for the proposed structure. Staff doesn't have a problem with the steel structure in this particular location. It's in the rear of the building or rear of the property behind the existing dwelling that will continue to be used at least for office purposes. And it's heavily wooded in the back. Even though there are many trees that will be removed to make way for the building and the paved circulation area and driveway, it's heavily secluded in the back there, and so staff doesn't have a problem with the proposed steel structure. Got some landscaping that's proposed, minimal landscaping. Staff is recommending some additional landscaping around the parking lot location on the south side and also along the south edge of the proposed stormwater basin. Lighting that's proposed on the site, minimal lighting on the proposed building in the back, some wall-mounted fixtures that are cutoff type fixtures, but then there are 2 light poles, one in the parking lot in the front and one in the drive on the rear of the house that are actually floodlights that are capable of being tilted. And so staff is recommending that those be cutoff type fixtures and not capable of tilting and casting glare or light to the road or to the adjoining properties. Additional staff comments or concerns. In the course, the retaining wall on the east side of the property generated some concern with the property owners to the east. Staff met out at the property with Scott Morgan, Sam Wysocki representing the House of Homemade Sausage, our village engineer, public works director, and some others to discuss the retaining wall issue. And in the course of putting in the driveway along the east property line, the property elevation is being raised up, thus the need for the retaining wall. And in the course of doing that, it was suggested that maybe the 2 property owners could work together and come up with a common grading filling plan, if you will, that would deal with the stormwater runoff. in a manner that would prohibit runoff onto the House of Homemade Sausage property, while at the same time allowing development without the need for this retaining wall and elevating the property. At the end of the day, the House of Homemade Sausage property owners indicated to staff that they didn't want anything to be done to their property and to just go ahead with the plan to install the retaining wall. So that's what the staff approval is recommending. The proposal is to include that retaining wall that varies in height from 1 foot near the front along Mequon Road to 3 to 4 feet at various points along the way, all the way back, pretty much the full length of the east common property line between this property and the House of Homemade Sausage. Now, the reason I bring that up is that in the course of installing that driveway and retaining wall, some of those trees that you see in the aerial photos are going to have to be either trimmed or even completely removed in order to accommodate that construction. So that's going to reduce that natural screening that exists today between the two properties. And in the conditional use permit, there was a requirement that, the building and the equipment be screened from view from the public and adjoining properties. So with that, staff is recommending that in place of, or once the retaining wall is installed and the driveway is installed, that there also be a privacy screen installed along that east property line, essentially from where the front of the building is. I believe it's about 165 feet approximately. And that screen could be all landscaping if it's clearly a visual screening, or could include a privacy fence or some combination of the two. But staff is recommending that that be a requirement along with a revised landscape plan that shows those additional features. The Public Works has indicated some minor corrections that need to be made in their February. It's a February 7th memo that needs to be addressed. The standard condition about state-approved plans and occupancy bond. There really are no other staff comments because the plans have been revised to respond to previous comments raised by staff over the course of the last year. The staff recommendation is to approve the building plans for a 4,400 square foot detached accessory vehicle and equipment storage building and site development plans for the parking lot reconstruction, the retaining wall, the stormwater facility improvements, all of which are shown on the plans, subject to 12 conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve the building plans for a 4,400 square foot detached accessory vehicle and equipment storage building and site development plans for parking lot reconstruction, retaining wall, and stormwater facility improvements to the existing 1.14 acre site on Mequon Road with the 12 conditions as presented.
Second,
Motion made and seconded. Discussion.
I have one question. The shrubbery that might have to be removed because of the retaining wall, is that what's shown? It's actually on the adjacent property? Because it's not on the property we're talking about, is it? If I'm looking at the drawings correctly.
He's asking if the removal of the trees will be on the adjacent property.
Any trees on the adjacent property would have to remain they couldn't remove them, but any components that are over the property line can be trimmed.
Okay, all right, I understand.
Which ultimately the one of the conditions, if you want to call it a condition, is more of an encouragement, and that is that the owner, Scott Morgan, work cooperatively with the House of Homemade Sausage property owner in the course of constructing, because the retaining wall is on the 1 foot off the property line, and there are going to be some impacts to trees that are on the House of Homemade Sausage property that lean over the property line that may very well need to be trimmed back.
Okay, you kind of answered my question in that if it's already been discussed that maybe the two property owners would work together, so I'm sure they can come to some agreement. Sounds like they started with that grading idea, but I didn't know where that left off.
Further discussion? Mr.
Along
Kimmer.
the same lines, I was just, and I don't have it to scale drawing here, but do you know how close those trees are to the property line? I guess I'm concerned not just above the above ground portion of the tree, but the roots, so what happens if the roots are cut or compacted during construction and then the tree declines or even topples over in a windstorm? Was that brought up in that discussion with homemade sausage?
Yes, to a certain degree. Having been out at the property, yes, it's clear that in addition to some shrubs and probably some invasive, type trees growing up along or right on the property line, there are some nicer trees in the back that are very likely to be impacted by construction on this site by way of the roots being impacted. Frankly, we don't have any specific code requirements that address that sort of thing. Which is why the hope is that two owners would get together and identify which trees might, be impacted, and maybe some preemptive removal at the time construction is taking place, that be identified. So it isn't, however long it takes for a tree where its roots are impacted to slowly die and eventually, be in a position of toppling over.
Yeah, I mean, well, they'll die slowly, but sometimes they'll come over more quickly in a windstorm. If it depends how far away you're cutting from the trunk, and if it was a structural root or not. But it's just something to think about, and it is difficult to deal with these situations where it's right on the property line. So, but I just was wondering if there was any discussion between the two owners, I guess, about that, and hopefully they can work together to resolve those issues.
There was a strong attempt to try and sort of mediate between the two property owners and get some agreement on some things. At the end of the day, we weren't as successful as we had hoped. So again, we're sort of leaving open the strong encouragement for the two owners to work cooperatively, so it doesn't become a personal property rights dispute sort of thing somewhere down the road.
Is there representation from All Terrain here? No?
Yes, I'm here, Scott Morgan.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, do you feel comfortable that you've worked out something that's amicable, or?
When I first bought the property, I got along with the people over there. Had many conversations, some of them, half hour or longer. But in trying to receive a letter of acknowledgement that this was going on, one of them, was real short with me. He didn't handle it very well and created an uncomfortable situation, as far as trying to work with them. But I could clarify that there's one tree on the property line, it probably grows half and half. And I have a willingness to, round out the wall around it, to avoid killing that tree.
Mm-hmm.
But the other trees in question they're all dead, or like Jeff pointed out, invasive species trees. So there's not really a big deal there, unless someone wants to turn it into a big deal.
Okay. Trustee Baum.
So my willingness to accept this is really based on the first image, which is the overhead image of the site, and where the site is totally surrounded by trees, and you put the building in the center of those trees and you hide the building.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at the landscape plan, and there's barely a single tree left on your property. You appear to be cutting down everything up to the property line and relying on your neighbor's trees to screen your building. Is that really the case?
Well, the retainer wall was brought into play after one or two reviews of the plan that was brought to my attention that we need to put a retainer wall in. And I haven't really had a chance to work up to the point where I could include a landscape plan with, you know, the final landscaping. I have no problem with putting up a privacy screen, a fence. I have no problem with working with my neighbors if they have a willingness to. I've talked to a representative of the apartment complex to the west. You know, and they understand what's going on and they don't seem to have any objections. And I've talked to them about planting trees along the property line, but on that west property line there's a electric or power line that runs down there, and it's not really suitable for planting on the property line. And the retainer wall and driveway are going to create what would be a 4-foot planting area between the edge of the driveway and the back side of the retainer wall, which the retainer wall would need to be placed on the property line so that I have that full 4 feet to allow me to plant the plants inside there, you know, centering on that 4 feet so that they don't have a negative effect on the driveway or the longevity of the retainer wall. So that has been talked about. It's not on the plan, but I will go on record saying that I have the willingness to provide a privacy screen, either a fence or preferably, you know, some type of arborvitae or something that stays green year round. That would be my first choice if that was acceptable.
Director Retzlaff, how does that acknowledgement play into the 12 recommendations?
Well, I think that would satisfy one of the requirements for the privacy screening along the east property line. My question is, now that we have Matt here, is it possible to install some form of evergreen in a 4-foot wide space without, you know, creating problems for the wall or the driveway on either side?
It might be possible to put something like an arborvitae, like you said, in there. There's some like emerald green arborvitaes grow about 3-4 feet wide and pretty tall, but you would be limited. Probably you wouldn't want to put anything too big in there because it just doesn't have enough room for the roots to grow and could probably cause issues with the retaining wall. You know, I would think 4 feet is not much.
A better source.
If you're going for that taller type screen.
Yes.
Scott indicated his willingness to put around the tree right on the property line. Oh, thank you. Scott indicated his willingness to deal with the one tree that's growing on the common property line by curving the wall around it. Does that really do any good for a tree? So there's not just a standard minimum radius around the base. Matt, can you turn your microphone on?
Sorry, you know, you're aiming to get to the drip line of a tree, which is where the leaves extend to the branches, but you can get within that sometimes up to 1/3 to 2/3 and still be successful. but it kind of depends on the tree and what's going on underneath it with the roots. So I can't really tell you without seeing it. I can't give you a good answer on that.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Are any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for joining us. Next item under new business is MSI General, agent for Germantown Properties, property owner at North 112, West 15800 Mequon Road. Site plan review for exterior building renovations for the Sendix Village Center. Give us some more information and background on new business item C. I'll turn the meeting over to our associate planner, Emily Zant.
Thank you. MSI General, the agent for G-Town Properties, is proposing a exterior remodel of the existing commercial building located in the Sendix Village Center on Mequon Road. The property is a part of a planned development district. There's residential uses to the north and to the northwest, and commercial uses to the east, south, and west. The proposed improvements include the following: new paint finishes on the exterior facade, whitewashing of the existing brick masonry units, and replacement of the existing stone base with brick masonry units. The Sendix facade itself will remain as is and is not included in this project. The proposal also includes a new built-up facade on the west end of the building, including a large hipped gable roof to be constructed over the new tenant. Interior improvements will be made for this tenant, and we just received today a zoning permit application for Pet Supplies Plus in this location. The property will continue to be served by the existing accesses from Mequon Road and Francis Drive to the east. The proposed reconfiguration will result in a total of 10 parking stalls plus one additional ADA compliant stall. This will be an increase in 2 parking stalls to the site. The proposed exterior remodel will add 520 square feet of impervious surface to the site. The site is served by municipal storm sewer. A variety of deciduous and evergreen shrubs and perennials will be installed on the site, surrounded with hardwood bark mulch. There is one existing tree to the west of the building that will be preserved. There's an existing wooded area along the west side of the site that screens the improvements from the property to the west. So pursuant to section 17.49 of the zoning code, the Plan Commission does serve as the village's architectural review board and is responsible for enforcing the principles set forth under 17.493 concerning design and exterior appearance. The village forester did recommend just adding protection fencing and some measurement information for the tree that's to be preserved on the west side of the building. The engineering department, public works department did provide plan revisions that have been made and resubmitted. The public works director has approved these changes. So it's staff's recommendation to approve the site development and building plans for an exterior remodel on the existing commercial building located at N112W15800 Mequon Road, subject to 4 conditions. There is a materials board against the wall there if you have any questions, and representatives from MSI are here this evening. And I believe the property owner is on WebEx if you have any questions for them.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners?
I gotta get back to the first page so I can read it appropriately. I will make a motion to approve the site development and building plans for the exterior remodeling of the existing commercial buildings located on 9.78 acres on Mequon Road as presented with the 4 conditions.
Okay,
Second?
motion made. We have a second?
Yes.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Trustee Baum.
So just for clarification, the extent of the remodeling is going, Pick and Save is not being remodeled. It's the rest of the center that is being
Go east.
Sendex.
Sendex.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the Sendex facade will remain as is. A majority of the improvements are really just the changing of the colors and the materials on the facade of the building. This very western section will have some structural changes and a change in the roof line.
So all the other commercial components of the center will have a similar color scheme except for the Sendex portion?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
So it is a revamp.
Yeah. Not including the Sendex.
Correct, but that's mostly brick.
Yeah. Yeah, in general, I like it. You followed some of the directions. You followed some of the directions we gave you. You broke up the massing with different color schemes. You didn't provide exactly the same thing throughout the whole center. And Mr. Shadid, I don't have to disapprove roof-mounted signs on this one.
Yeah, you know, I noticed that. It's all set up correctly, isn't it?
And that's the way it should be done.
And I want you to
So-
know that I was going to comment on that if you didn't, so thank you.
He cut you off.
Inside joke between me and Mr. Shadid. Yeah, I believe it is a nice upgrade to the center, and I appreciate the efforts that the developers have gone through. Thank you.
Further discussion? Well, further discussion? I would echo some of Trustee Baum's statements in regards to appreciation for upgrading the building. Congratulations on your new tenant and for making, I really do appreciate making this additional investment in this area. I think that it'll help draw more people in and to make it more of a place to go. You have a lot of amenities there, a lot of other services that people would want to see besides the grocery store and the anchor on the other side. I think will help to draw business to both sides. So we appreciate that very much, and thank you for your continued investment in Germantown. Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for joining us online. Our next item under new business is item D, Heritage Place Joint Venture LLC, agent and property owner located at North 115 West 16165 Saxony Village Boulevard and North 115 West 16225 Saxony Square, Building 1, Land 15, LLC property owner at North 116 West 16261 Main Street, MCB Investments LLC property owner, North 116 West 16257 Main Street, 2-lot certified survey map, 2 combined parcels. To explain all those numbers and buildings to us, we have our associate planner, Emily Zant.
Thank you. Heritage Place Joint Venture is the property owner. Is proposing the approval of a 2-lot certified survey map to reconfigure the existing 3 parcels of Saxony Village into 2 lots. This is the location of the existing property. The site is zoned RM2 residential and B3 commercial. There's a mix of residential and commercial property surrounding the subject property. The purpose of the configuration, again, is just clean up the existing parcels and designate the open space along Main Street as a separate parcel from the Saxony Village apartment buildings. So lot 1 is highlighted in red there and is 0.545 acres. Lot 2 is 23.7 acres. Due to the minimal frontage along lot one along Main Street, and in an effort to minimize the number of access points on Main Street, staff does recommend requiring the following as conditions of approval. An access restriction prohibiting vehicle access to Main Street along the entire width of the parcel, and an access easement on parcel or lot 2 that runs the entire length of parcel 1, frontage that abuts Saxony Village Boulevard for the benefit of lot 1 to allow an access drive in the location to be mutually agreed upon by the village and a Saxony Village property owner. With that being said, staff did speak with Scott Bentz of JBJ Properties today and is proposing a modification to condition number 2, which is to say that the access easement condition would simply be an access easement reservation to be shown on the CSM, so that in the future, any maintenance agreements or exact location can be determined between the two property owners. So different from what was in your packet, staff is recommending a modification to condition number 2. The village engineering department did also identify a few technical corrections, and a revised CSM with those corrections must be submitted and approved by the engineering department prior to recording of the CSM. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the 2-lot certified survey map to reconfigure the existing 3 parcels of Saxony Village into 2 lots with the following, with 3 conditions.
Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed 2-lot certified survey map to reconfigure the existing 3 parcels of Saxony Village located at said address into 2 lots with the 3 conditions as presented.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Bong.
I wish Trustee Zabel or Trustee Wing were here. Did we not maximize the units per acre requiring the entire parcel and have debate after debate after debate that every inch of land was required?
No. Discuss this notion that this area that's shown as parcel 1 is now a green space.
Yep.
Could be developed something in addition to apartment complex. In fact, I'd like to think honestly that continue to be a green space, or acquired for parking purposes somewhere down the road.
That's part of my big frustration is that was the part of the initial plan
Right.
was we will allow you to do this if we get these amenities. And one of them was on that piece of land, they donated that to the village for a parking lot
That was when it was.
when we were going to go bigger and better. And I just remember all the arguments that we needed every piece of land because it was a discussion of whether you're allowed to use wetlands as part of your overall development area as green space. And a week ago, I got hammered from a former trustee that I was wrong in saying you could use all the land. So I'm very clear of that discussion that you needed every inch of property you had to get all this on there.
Right, but keep in mind that the parcel upon which the density was calculated to ultimately allow the number of units that were approved is based on the RM2 zoned property. There's a small portion that's that remains to be zoned B3 general business, upon which parcel 1 is located. So the area that was used in the density calculation did not include this parcel 1. That was the area that was intended, at least thought of being set aside for some other use. And I agree with you. When the planned development district proposal was first floated to the village, it wasn't just this little parking area. There were other amenities as well, that we lost out on that opportunity. But to your point, no, this area was not part of that density calculation. So we're not, double counting or using something that's already accounted for in some other calculation.
I really can research that.
Well, you're taking it, well, it was separated parcels and now making them combined to two. You had three and now it's two.
You have
Correct.
the original 3?
Yeah, there were
That's picture of the original 3?
I can try and pull it up here.
And that's what Jeff is saying, that part of that, where the buildings are, were part of that, one of those parcels where it was configured.
Yeah, and we got into the whole debate about whether you can or you can't include the wetlands, and honestly, the interpretation of staff was that you can at that point in time. If you recall, as a result of this project, there were some changes to the code that were ultimately made that didn't affect this property and development, but affected everything else that came after it, including the wetland calculate, the net acre definition that we changed. And
I remember fighting for that because I believe in my history and my experience, you can use the wetlands. And now to see that we're gonna peel off a parcel, I thought this was maxed out and there was no more land available.
When it
Hey,
was
Jeff.
separated.
we have Scott Bentz he's attending online.
Mr. Benz.
Hi there, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reiterate what Jeff says. He's absolutely correct. The parcel of Saxony Village, originally, if you think back before it was Saxony Village, did not connect the main street. We then went out and acquired the property from the railroad, and we acquired the property from Jacobus, which were not part of Saxony Village's calculation. So the net density was calculated purely on the Saxony Village property and not on the other two. So this certified survey map is going to, in effect, make Saxony Village a few square feet larger, because we're extending the property line out to Main Street. And then the parcel that is being created within the red circle is simply going to be, it's still business and it's going to remain a business owning. But that was never part of Saxony Village.
And what's the area of that?
It's a half an acre.
Really? Do I have that problem too?
Both of you are having that problem today.
It's a half an acre. What can we do with a half an acre?
Well, we can make a parking lot, but we'd have to, we being the village or some private entity would have to acquire it in order to do that. Arguably, and I was talking with Scott earlier today, one of the ideas that had floated through my head when I was first considering the whole CSM and reviewing it was that it's conceivable somebody could propose to put up, one of those little drive through or drive around coffee station kind of things on half an acre.
Here's your next business.
Or not necessarily based on drive through, but a small little building.
We can get a Kodak photo hut.
Yeah.
There's a blast from the past.
And again, we're not trying to create anything new here. We're just trying to take 3 lots and convert them into 2. One being the Saxony Village, making it slightly larger by extending it through the Jacobus piece all the way out to Main Street. And then the second lot in red, which was formerly the railroad property, which is now the MCB property. So we're just cleaning up 3 lots into 2, and we don't have any plans for it at the moment. But if and ever when we do, it's going to be ready to move forward.
So why don't you just create it into one lot? 3 lots into one.
Because that's not what we want to do.
It's his land, he can do what he wants.
It really is
Only if
a
we approve it.
continuation of the cleanup process. I mean, the railroad and the Jacobus properties are brownfields, as well as a portion of the Saxony Village. And so, we've collectively have taken a real eyesore that plagued Main Street for many years and turned it into something very desirable. And now we're just simply cleaning up some lines, some property lines, and again, in my opinion, creating an opportunity for some future use there that I truly hope becomes something that benefits the public at large, no matter what it is.
Okay.
Further discussion? You have a motion, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
Approval with all 3 commissions.
right. Any further discussion? Mr. Nils?
I'm just gonna bring it up again, just for clarity's sake. Is the motion based on the amended recommendation that we received today?
Yes.
Oh, instead of an easement, it's an easement reservation.
Correct.
Thank you.
Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? One opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Benz, for joining us.
Hey, thank you guys.
Next item under new business is item E, Harvest Hills Subdivision LLC, agent and property owner, Lot 31's Harvest Hills Subdivision, and Jeffrey L. and Sarah M. Holtenbeck. Property owners, North 118, West 13147 Taylor Trail, Lot 30, Harvest Hills Subdivision, 2-lot certified survey map to adjust property lines.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
You don't want to hear the presentation? Motion made. Do I have a second?
Presentation.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Or questions?
You want to hear the presentation?
Can you just show us what it is?
Sure, yep. So the dashed red line along the east property line of proposed lot 1 would be moved about 70 feet to the east into proposed lot 2 to accommodate a mound septic system.
Oh. And it doesn't impact the other one for same?
The lot 2 would meet the minimum lot size, and we did receive confirmation or soil tests from Washington County saying that both lots then could support septic systems.
And where, on lot 1, where is it proposed? To the front or to the back?
On lot 1,
Yeah. Where is the septic
it is
proposed?
proposed right between.
Yeah.
Between the 2 red lines.
Oh,
There's
okay.
there's some history here that we can go down that path if you want to.
That was always a concern.
Well, there was a septic site on lot 1, obviously was predetermined when the subdivision was created.
Right.
There was an issue with that area being effectively destroyed by some activity. There was a system installed that didn't work properly. Make a long story short, they need to replace the septic system that was just recently installed in the last year and a half. And there's no other place to put it on the property. So the proposal was to enlarge lot 1 by taking away some of the land from lot 2 and creating a new space, a new place to put the new septic system.
Okay. Did you propose a motion?
Yep.
Okay.
And it was seconded.
Any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Next item under new business is item F for Village of Germantown property owner located at North 112 West 17001 Mequon Road, sign review application for a monument sign replacement on the Village Hall Library property. Give us more background information on this. We'll turn it over to Community Development Director Jeff Retzloff.
All right, you'll recall back in February of this year, the Plan Commission was presented with the new monument sign proposal for the village campus to be located right at the entrance on Mequon Road. And at that time, the sign on the screen is what was presented, and at first was approved by the Plan Commission, subject to there being some samples brought in for the material that was to be used on that tower feature, because the original proposal was that the only thing masonry would have been the base, and that the tower feature as well as the rest of the cabinet pieces would all be fabricated aluminum. And the Plan Commission at their subsequent meeting reconsidered their action to approve pending submission of those material samples, because you were concerned that the brick pattern was going to look cheap or cheesy and would fade over time. So in the end, after that Plan Commission recommendation, the Department of Public Works Director reached out to the contractors that he was discussing this with to try and get some direction about samples, and it wasn't coming together. So in the end, he simply took the Planning Commission advice effectively to go with a full masonry, both on the base and on the tower feature, and change the specifications, and that's where we are today. So there's the sample material issue is kind of a moot point. So we're back, and it's all masonry, except for the cabinet around the electronic message center, and that curved piece on the top will also be a fabricated part of the cabinet. Yeah. And it's really at this point, so we're looking for Plan Commission approval, but maybe more importantly, any direction on the masonry piece for the tower. It's going to be some combination of face brick or tile. The question is this pattern acceptable? Should there be something else proposed?
It's what's on the building.
I'll make a motion to approve option number 1 as presented, where the base and the tower element are masonry that matches the village hall and or the library. And the pattern matches village hall and the library too.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion.
And the final approval, apparently the Public Works Director will be taking whatever comes out of tonight's meeting to the Building Oversight Committee for their ultimate sign off and approval.
Okay. Any further discussion?
The only comment I want to make is that answered the concern I had over the aluminum construction before. So I like this proposal.
All right, very good.
Just when I look at the new sign location picture that I take it they are going to existing masonry was like
No, it's the library.
There's a library. It's closer to the library.
but the intent is to match that.
Yes.
Page is the first option 1.
Which graphic are you referring to? The
Option 1 where you had it up there a while ago.
yeah.
It's kind of a brown and beige, whereas the picture
Pinky orange.
is much more orange.
Oh, you mean the rendering?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's just with regard to where am I going here?
Right.
Yeah, it's intended to match the.
I think we'll work out the final color scheme at the
Was my wife would kill me. It clashes.
construction committee.
Every time you pass it.
It's green.
Yeah,
Nobody
I
liked
think the rendering the rendering is just some difference in the use of the material, the color scheme and the photograph.
We cannot match colors identically in computers, no matter how much we try.
Further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Next item under new business is item G, signs and lines by Stretch, agent for Mahuda and Associates LLC, property owner of Mahuda Tool Corporation, located at North 118 West 19137 Bunsen Drive, sign review application.
I could jump on it if you want me
You
to.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Make a motion to approve the proposed monument sign and wall signs for Mahuda Tool Corporation located on Bunsen Drive, subject to the one condition as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion or question? No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Next item under new business, item H, Innovative Signs, Inc., agent for Mold Makers Investments LLC, property owners of MGS located at North 117 West 19125 Fulton Drive and West 188 North 11707 Maple Road, sign review application.
Make a motion to approve the proposed wall sign for MGS Manufacturing located at Fulton Drive, subject to the one condition as presented.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Leshewski.
The rendering of the sign, sorry, there's a blue stripe below it. Is that part of the sign or is that already existing? Just maybe a feature?
Is that in the building?
It's, yeah, it's proposed to be as part of the building architecture. It's
What's that?
not part of the sign, no. This is for the recently completed building addition.
Going up fast.
Yep.
Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. That takes care of all items under new business. Does anyone have any announcements they'd like to make? The only announcement I'd like to make is this weekend on Saturday, there is the MyFest celebration where those that ordered the MyFest in a box can pick it up between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. in the Village Hall parking lot, actually closer to the library. And so if you've ordered a MyFest in a box and are looking to celebrate MyFest at home with that great presentation, pick it up between 1 and 4 p.m. If you didn't order it and you'd still like to possibly purchase one, they will have some extras available for those that have not ordered. But you can, I believe, still probably go to the website, but I'm not sure of that, so I'm not going to direct you to do that. But I'm sure if they get other purchases, they're more than willing to accommodate because it is a fundraiser for them. So for all those that participated, thank you, and have a happy MyFest celebration at your home. Any other announcements? No other announcements? Then we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you all for watching, and have a good night.
Thank you.